Hi, welcome to Parenting and Teaching with Richie Huffman. I'm Richie Huffman, President and CEO of Celebrate Preschools. On these podcasts, we'll be talking to real parents, teachers about what's going on at home, in the classroom, and everything in between. I hope you find these conversations informative, helpful, sometimes funny, and sometimes serious. So let's go ahead and get started. Hey, I'm Richie.
And this is Allie.
And we are here with Monyka Berrocosa.
Close.
Help me.
Close.
I knew I was going to ruin
Did
this
you go to Celebrate as a child?
Berrocosa.
You would know how to say that.
Berrocosa.
Berrocosa.
The Cosa.
Phonetically spelled out.
I apologize.
It's all good.
The executive director of John Brick Mental Health Foundation. So welcome, Monyka.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I just love what you guys do to ensure that kids get on a path strong and healthy. So It's an honor to be here. Thanks for making the time.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so we asked you here today, Monyka. I almost wanted to title this podcast Opening Our Eyes to Mental Illness. I think it's one of those words in the community right now that people might be nervous to talk about because they don't understand. And so I think this podcast is going to be a good resource for our teachers and parents who are listening, because we have someone who experiences it firsthand. And so can you give us a little bit of your background? We know you're a mom.
Yes, I am. I like to say that is my first job. I answer to mom before I answer to anything else, including CEOs all over the world who I consult with in change management and a lot of things. And I'm here wearing the hat of the acting executive director for the John W. Brick Foundation, which is a 501c3 public foundation founded in Baltimore, Maryland by Lynn and Victor Brick, the founders of, you may have heard of, Brick Bodies. Mm-hmm. And they are also successful Planet Fitness franchisee entrepreneurs. And they had real challenges with mental illness in their family, namely in the form of depression and schizophrenia. Their eldest, Victor's eldest brother, John, died due to complications related to the disease. And their brother, Bob, still struggles with the reality of mental illness. And so when they decided how would they best make a meaningful dent in the universe, as Victor likes to quote Steve Jobs, it was thought that, this is a subject that isn't talked about, that is misunderstood, that is often ignored to the detriment of families and individuals dealing with it directly or indirectly. And as a result, the best thing they could do to give back would be to create an organization that would be dedicated to funding, conducting, and promoting evidence-based research on how holistic treatments such as exercise, nutrition, and healthy lifestyle choices benefit overall mental health. And they're totally dedicated to this. Their 5K is at the Maryland State Fairgrounds on Sunday, October 14th. You guys are sponsoring the Kids Zone, so thank you so much for that. And they're expecting 2,000 people here, alongside a gentleman by the name of Wim Hof, who those in the know him as the Iceman. Niccolo is shaking his head, your producer. And a lot of people in Silicon Valley, the tech community, know about Wim Hof because Wim Hof himself was struggling with the realities of mental illness. His wife committed suicide, and he was left with 4 children to raise, young children, imagine that. Wow. And he turned to himself to develop tools and resources to not lose it and to counter his own depression and suicidal tendencies. And that's now called the Wim Hof method. So he's going to be part of the weekend. There's going to be ice baths at the race. And if people register for the race, they actually can come on Saturday to the Wim Hof experience at the Brick Bodies Padonia location for free.
That's so cool. So when we say when you speak about mental health, like what is mental health?
Well, first of all, I think it's
mental illness. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that's a great question. As I think that it's important to differentiate the two. So mental illness is really a technical, verified health condition that involves changes in behavior, emotion, attitude, and it can be a combination of those or one of those, which is what makes it so insipid. It's like, you can have somebody who's a great student, super successful business person, has a lot of friends, but they're suffering from depression. which could be chemically or environmentally induced or both, and you don't know. And all of a sudden, they sadly commit suicide. In the case of Anthony Bourdain, I think some people maybe suspected, but most people didn't. Or Kate Spade is another one this summer that we've heard of.
Robin Williams, the list goes on and on,
Oh, the list goes on and on. So mental illness can be chemical, biological, or it can be environmentally induced in the case of post-traumatic stress disorder with our veterans who are, giving of themselves and serving for our country. So it's a big issue.
Wow.
That's mental illness. Mental health is how people function in their daily activities. Okay, so it relates to your productivity, so work, school, caregiving, healthy relationships. Do you have good, solid, healthy relationships, or are you in toxic, dysfunctional, relationships that really take away from the quality of your life, the choices you're making there, as well as the ability to engage in manners that and cope with adversity and challenges. So mental health is like you lose your job. Somebody who's mentally healthy will be down, will go cry in their beer or their coffee or whatever, will call their 10 best friends because they know what to do. They have inbuilt ways of resiliency.
Those outlets,
and
right?
Those outlets, and they'll get support, they'll ask for help, they'll poo-poo for a while, but eventually they'll pick themselves up, they'll put their resume together, they'll look at their contacts, and they'll get out. Someone who doesn't have strong mental health, so has lowered mental resiliency, is going to really go down from this. And for the example I chose is one of the most stressful things you can experience. It is a precursor for depression. So they can all of a sudden start thinking, it's me, I'm a horrible person, I can never do anything right. And they quickly start to go down a spiral that their people around them may or may not understand. So you guys deal with kids. Let's talk about mental health with kids. So mental health with kids could be as simple as one of the kids who for whatever reason is just a little bit different or wore a color of jumper that day that everybody's decided that kid's got the cooties and no one's talking to that kid. We know how children are. We may want to prevent this behavior, but it's interpersonal dynamics, right? It's sandbox reality. So a resilient child will come home and go, mommy or daddy or whoever, grandpa, grandma, no one played with me today. They didn't like my black jumper. I like my black jumper. Tomorrow I'm going to wear it again. And that kid is like...
And we love that child.
Yeah, that kid is a very resilient kid,
Right.
at a young age. That kid has, and I'm not a clinician or, psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm a mom, but I'm just saying, did a lot of babysitting as a young girl. That kid's a resilient kid. That kid has pretty solid mental health, even at that young age. A child that is not resilient and where a red flag should go up is that kid comes home, that kid doesn't eat dinner, that kid doesn't want to play, that kid that night doesn't want to hear the bedtime story, doesn't want to cuddle their favorite dog or their favorite doll, that kid's crying, not talking about it, or crying hysterically and saying, the kids are so mean, I don't want to go back, don't send me back, don't make, And next thing you know, that kid's not in Celebrate the next day. No. The parents have called and said, we want a meeting because something happened with our child. Right. And I know that this can happen. I've been that parent. And you're sitting there going, what happened? You don't necessarily know. The director may not even realize the impact that a slight comment or a little inadvertent behavior on the classmates could have had on this child. That child clearly is demonstrating a lack of resiliency. That child is clearly demonstrating a lack of being able to handle a normal, quote unquote, what is normal these days, situation and group environment. And could be cause to call the pediatrician and say, little Susie wore this jumper, came home, traumatized about how she was treated. We'd just like to talk to you about it and see. It's never too early.
Yeah, I kind of have a comment and a question coming from listening because I'm having light bulbs going off as a educator because I think your first and initial reaction is, oh, that kid's being like just wimpy or like they just can't handle it. Like it's fine. Tell her it's fine. Just go back. And I think you hear that so much with the younger kids. Like it's, well, he took my pencil and now I'm sobbing. It's like, well, ask for your pencil back and you kind of move on to the next thing. But so I think as I'm learning already just from this one conversation we just had, that I need to almost slow down and really look at the situation and what's happening with these kids. Because now my question is, how early can this happen? When do we start seeing this in kids?
So the research that I've pulled for you, because I really did not want to just tell you things and not have, have things that were credible. So according to NIH, with the earliest phobias, and other anxiety and mood and substance disorders, it can be anywhere from as young as 3.
Wow.
Okay.
What can we do as parents? Is there something we can do as parents to help build that?
Definitely. So I think let's take a step back, because this is the thing that's so scary about mental illness. It's kind of an abyss. Once you open the subject of mental health and mental illness.
I feel like we're in it right now.
Oh, we are. We're in an epidemic. And that's all I'll say. It starts at the top. But, so first of all, when little Susie, we're going to not harp on little Susie, but little Susie or little Johnny comes home to parents and this happens. First of all, the parents have a responsibility. Is this out of control as a reaction for her? Has she always thrown tantrums over something like this? Is she particularly sensitive to her clothing? Is she particularly sensitive to being, popular, not popular? Does she feel she has enough friends? And that's where you really get into a dialogue with your child. So it starts with the parents knowing their children and taking the time to know their children. And here's where you guys as educators for a big part of the day, you can do everything you want. But if the parents at home basically have Susie or Johnny with a nanny, they're not even paying attention to what's happening, or they themselves are in dysfunction or mental illness, they're going to miss this. So let's focus to what we can do, which is the educators you guys celebrate. So first of all, empowering your directors and your educators to know the warning signs, and I'm going to share some of them with you. Secondly, making sure that the curriculum is spaced as such that there is time to check in with every child in the morning and in the afternoon if they are there for a prolonged period of time. And the reason being, in the case of my own son, my son was born, he was a month overdue. He was the size of a 3-month-old. He's now 16. He's 6'4", weighs 195 pounds. When he went to preschool, they would not pick him up when he cried because he was too big. But the reality is he needed that care as much as the 3-year-old next to him who happened to be smaller. When he started to play soccer in Little League, he was literally told by the coach, run 10 minutes after everybody else has started running. Why? Because he was the size of a 6-year-old. Wasn't his fault. He wasn't obese. He was tall.
Just treat him differently.
You have a longer stride. So this kid constantly felt, and he's a really, I hate to say it, not that looks matter, but he's a very good looking kid. So he looked like a golden boy, but he was constantly maligned and sort of shortchanged for his size, because what invariably happened is people thought he was older than he was. Oh, you can just handle it.
You treat him
right?
So
sensitizing educators and anyone dealing with the child, caretakers, parents, grandparents, to make sure that you have an open relationship. How are you feeling today? Anything bothering you? What did you learn today? What was the best part about today?
And how does that support this? How does that support?
Well, because it creates dialogue. Because unfortunately, none of us have X-ray vision, and we cannot see into the mind of these wonderful little creatures. And the only way we're going to know is if they talk to us and if they tell us. And we're not certified therapists or play therapists or whatever. So the only way we're going to get some insight is if we have a regular, not out of the blue on the day of the incident, but a regular constant dialogue that is without judgment and open and loving and caring and interested in what they have to say. Because only then can Susie or Johnny say, well, people didn't like my jumper. Well, how did that make you feel? That's a question a parent can ask. Well, it made me
educators. I know recently in education, morning meetings became a big thing in public schools, and I know we do it here at Celebrate too, but we as educators used to be encouraged to spend that 10 minutes in the morning just saying, what'd you do last night? What'd you eat for dinner? And they might be like really simple questions, but it gives every kid a chance almost. And kids will say in front of a class, they're not shy usually to say, well, I didn't like it, or I didn't have my breakfast because my brother was mean to me. And so it kind of opens those doors for educators to start conversations with kids regardless of how young they are.
And hypothetically, I mean, listen, I don't want to harp on this poor jumper and this child, but if somebody, it's really is educational to do so. If somebody says to Susie and says, well, why are you so upset? Why your jumper, why somebody doesn't like your, well, because my grandpa gave it to me and grandpa went to heaven last week.
Right.
And it's my favorite because he gave it to me. So then that insight allows an educator to say, well, okay, you kids are making fun of this jumper. It's very special to her, and that's why she's wearing it. And then usually kids will go, oh, I'm sorry, and they'll hug, and you diffuse the bond.
If you just dig into those moments that take away, they're just being a sensitive kid. It's not always just sensitivity. There's reason behind it.
And newsflash, research shows we are sensitive beings, but society, technology, the pace of life, the strive for success and stuff is forcing us at times to not be sensitive.
Wow.
In the case of the need for speed and time is money. But the fact of the matter is we are humans. We need to continue to behave that way.
Yeah. The scary thing about what you just said, or the connection that I just put, every time we do a podcast, it's so wonderful because I become better by the time I walk out of this podcast, right? That's the gift of these podcasts, and hopefully for our listeners also. The connection I just put together was, having those conversations, asking our children, how was your day? How are you doing? Right. So if we're not doing that because they are so, they have their nose so pressed up against their phone with social media, they're only getting one side. And I think that's probably why the rate of teenage suicide is up, because they're neglecting to have those conversations with parents and with the ones that love them, that can ask those deeper questions, and they're only getting bombarded from their phones on what children want to say to them.
Exactly.
Right? I don't like, they're at 16, 17, they're probably not talking about their pajamas, but
you would be surprised.
But right, it's just a one side, voice coming in, instead of having that outlet on the parent side of, honey, how's your day? And, whether they're 16 or 17 or 15.
Right. And social media is taking away from that too, because you get that immediate, we've talked about it on podcasts before, that when teenagers and adults even are going onto social media, you're getting immediate feedback for what you're showing. You're getting
good and bad.
Immediate likes, but usually more good. And that's why those conversations, we're not taking time to talk to kids.
Yeah.
They're getting everything they need right on their phones. We've been talking about mental illness, and I think a lot of them have, to me at least, sounded a little more on the adult side of things. But can you give some examples maybe of what types of mental illness we're looking at in kids? Because we're talking about them feeling sad from jumpers and having these moments of sadness as children, but what are we actually looking at that stage in life?
Okay, so I think that you cannot have this discussion and not acknowledge that we live in times where, adults ourselves struggle. We turn on the news, whether we like who is in power or not. I can't vote. I'm Canadian. I'm totally agnostic on that issue. We have visceral reactions. The country is in one of its most divided times. Let's just admit it. People say it. Whatever side you're on or not, doesn't matter. But kids are seeing this and they're hearing this. And mom and dad are seeing this and hearing this. And mom and dad go to work and hear about it. So we're living in times of anxiety as it is. Secondly, the electronics are fantastic. But I find it fascinating that the scions of Silicon Valley have very different electronic policies for their own children than the products they produce for mass millions. And many tech leaders, in fact, have low electronic policies in their households. Why? Because they themselves are firsthand aware of the potential negative impacts of technology when it's not properly used. We've all seen that child who is so quiet in an adult restaurant sitting there with a tablet at 8:30 at night. I'm going to leave that up to the parents to decide if that's good or bad, but there is a wealth of research out there that says that, access to electronics for too long period of time is detrimental to brain dysfunction.
I think we can do a whole podcast.
Yeah, you could, and I could pull some stats for you. But the bottom line is, I also understand parents needing that time. So I'm not judging anyone. But we live in an epidemic right now where 1 in 5 adults, 18 and older, are dealing with mental illness. The highest form of mental illness at this moment in the U.S., and this is according to NAMI and NIH, is 23%. So I guess it's up to 1 in 4, almost 23% of the population is diagnosed with anxiety.
Wow.
Okay, so that's most prevalent. It's also the most prevalent in what children are experiencing. Okay, so children, they can experience a range of mental health conditions, but that's the most prevalent. The second is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is a buzzword almost, ADHD. My son has this.
Mine too.
And it looks like everybody's being diagnosed, and we can talk about this as a sidebar. The third is autism spectrum disorder, okay, so ASD. And that can range from someone being highly functional, highly intelligent, social, everything, but it's manifesting in OCD, or it's manifesting in ways that there's something that's just a little different and you don't really understand. And that can appear as early as 3, 4. I'm not an expert on autism, but I'm sure an autistic mom or dad could tell you. And what people don't realize about autism spectrum disorders is they come with companion conditions. So a lot of kids who have autism have ADHD.
Right.
And then ADHD, similar thing, has its own spectrum of companion conditions. So a lot of kids who have ADHD predisposed to have anxiety, have depression, have obsessive compulsive disorder, have addictive proclivity to, it could be sexual addiction, spending addictions, alcoholic addiction. So that's why it's so important to be aware of this, because when you know this, you can start to shape that child's environment so that they grow up, supported to handle the reality that their brain is going to direct them in those ways, whether they want to or not. Mood disorders, okay? So depression, anger management, sadness, extreme sadness, introspection to the point of just terrified of talking to anybody, very shy, over gregariousness, not respecting personal space, not respecting what belongs to someone else, things like that. And then schizophrenia. Schizophrenia can appear in children. It's hard to diagnose, but it's not impossible. And pediatricians have these checklists that when you are in public school, you get, I think it's called a 504 plan. You get this list that you're supposed to take to your pediatrician that the teachers have actually checked what they've observed. And then the pediatrician maps what they've observed. And based on that, there's a scale and a metric, and you can determine where the child is. And usually you're referred to like a Kennedy Krieger or a private testing facility. And if you're in Medicaid, Medicare, you're probably going to be referred to University of Maryland here in Baltimore. But then they have a clue. And what's really great is that once the educator has had to go through that process, already they're sensitized. Okay, this kid's got something. And that's not to hate the kid or demonize the kid. Unfortunately, educators in public school systems are overworked and underpaid. So a lot of them see this as, oh my God, another to-do. But it's really a tool for them, because the more they know about this kid that's in their school and in their class and how better to approach dealing with that kid, the less that kid's going to be a disruption for the rest of the class, and they're going to be able to move on, So,
and those rating scales too, I have filled out, so I can't even count how many of those I've done for kids in school. But they're also really great when they have a parent one also, which a lot of times when they would send the teacher a rating scale, they would send the exact same one to the parents. You'd both fill it out and it gets mailed directly back to the doctor. And more times than none, they are so off of each other, which is really interesting to see a parent's perspective on the way their child acts at home and in environments like the grocery store and going to friends' houses or playgrounds than what that child looks like in a structured setting in a school.
Now, you have a Facebook page related
I
to
do.
this?
So I started a Facebook page, and honestly, it's we've got about 1,000 people on it, but more or less. And it's called So My Kids Got ADHD, Now What? Because when we got the diagnosis very quickly, this was our reality. Okay, so we're both relatively successful. We went to school, we're 8 students, we graduated with honors from top universities. We were not children with ADHD. Mm-hmm. Later, I was diagnosed with ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, which explains why I can do 25 things well. And women are predisposed for that. But my ex-husband, who we're really good friends and we co-parent really well, he is your typical type A, super successful, left brain, I don't want to say unemotional, but this is how it will be. This is what we will do. And so when Alex started manifesting behavior in preschool, and we would get told, he's really challenging. He's really this. He's really that. And, we didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And we literally had to, that's why I say I'm a mental health advocate, because I had to learn. I had to go back to school almost and read studies, even though my first degree is in psychology, and read studies and find, because there just doesn't exist, at least not at that time, 12 years ago, just wasn't a lot. So I thought Facebook's such a great thing because when I find a study, I post it up there. When I see something that's a little bit inspiring, I know what it's like to be a mom of a special needs child, and you've got your whole day planned out for you and your employees to tell what to do and your other community commitments and all these things, and you get a phone call at 11 o'clock in the morning. You need to come get your child. Your child is just too disruptive today. It's not working for us. Or call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's say the school keeps the kids till 5. He's got a stomach ache. He's complaining. I can't give him anything. Please come pick him up. Or there's been an altercation with another child. Your child is bigger, so please come pick him up. And I swear this has happened without fail once a week since Alex is in an environment with educators and not with a nanny. So I've learned to bob and weave with it, and it's one of the reasons I never had a job, and I've always worked for myself. But I can imagine how parents and family members, because sometimes it's not the parents who are the primary caregivers, struggle with this. So we use this page with no funding. I mean, it's really just put up there what we can, and a range of scientific research, holistic theories, what's working for some parents, publications that are recognized, have good advice, programs, studies that are available if people want to, and also don't laugh, inspiration, because it's really hard as a parent dealing with this. And I had a high functioning child. Once we got medication, I don't want to say we were out of the bushes, but it was a lot easier. And I have the means to pay people to clean my house and to get my groceries delivered and stuff. Someone who doesn't, that's dealing with this and struggling to make that payment to the caregiver so they can work, they're overwhelmed. Right. So a little bit of inspiration to say, hey, today was a really bad day, but you're a great parent and it's going to be better tomorrow.
How'd you feel about the medication? I really struggled with that.
So I have a love-hate relationship with the medication because I cannot deny that when my son has it, he's a lot easier to deal with. And I hate using those words because I wonder how they affect his personal perception of himself. But he functions better, right? Oh my goodness, because at his core issue is executive function. So he is off the charts intelligent, off the chart, we've had him tested, off the charts pure intelligence, processing speed. He could process things, make you go crazy just trying to keep up with them. But when it comes to, here's your homework, Alex. You've got history, you've got English, and you've got math. Oh, and you've told your friends you're going to play Xbox at 8 o'clock p.m. Oh, and you're supposed to walk your dog once a day.
I have one of those at home.
Alex looks at all this, and because of the ADHD,
doesn't know where to start.
Says, I'm going to go with the pleasure center. I'm going to play Xbox.
Right.
But take the pleasure center out, and it's just the dog, which is an equally important task. It's a chore. You're expected to do it, and your homework. I got history, I got math, and I got, what did we say the other one was? Science. I'm going to do the dog because that's easy. I don't have to think. Right. I'm just going to do the dog, which means the homework doesn't get done. So then they sit there with the homework and they don't start because they cannot figure out what is the most important, not because they don't want to do it. And I have seen my son observed casually that he doesn't realize, sit there just looking at the papers, unable to decide.
Yeah.
And this is with medication.
So what's the hate part of the medication?
Well, the hate part of the medication, as a parent, he's off it all summer because he doesn't gain weight. It takes away his appetite. He himself is now at an age where he says, I don't like the way it makes me feel. It makes me feel jittery. And we have chosen not to give a counter to that, so a downer to counteract that. There's kids taking medication. They take the medication for the ADHD. They take a downer to calm them down. They take an upper to wake them up. They take something to sleep. And there are just, I would urge people to seek practitioners whose first reflex is not prescription.
Yeah.
Because what we have noticed is the more Alex exercises,
Let's talk about that.
Totally different story.
So let's talk about exercise and the Body's 5K coming up.
Okay. So the Bricks, first of all, I don't think a lot of people know, Lynn Brick is a former shock trauma nurse. Okay. So she is a shock trauma nurse. She worked at the worst of the worst, Johns Hopkins, downtown, saw the worst of the worst. And she became an aerobics instructor, and that led to them creating a club. But Victor Brick is an educator. He has a master's in education. He was a basketball coach. They're both Towson grads, and they know a lot about education formally as professionals. But what they realized is that they themselves, when they exercised, felt better. So they started to question, how much is exercise part of a treatment plan for people dealing with mental illness? And the closest example they had was their brother John at the time before he perished, and their brother Bob, both of who deal with schizophrenia and other complementary things. And nowhere was exercise part of the treatment plan. Okay. So fast forward, they've got kids, they've got teenagers. Their teenagers are highly athletic, not just because of who mom and dad are, but because they have a culture of exercise in that family for their own mental health. And their kids were high performing and very successful. And, both of them went to McDonough, which is known for being a very rigorous school. And, then John went to the Citadel, which is, really tough school. And they firmly believe that their ability to rely on exercise in times of stress. You're angry at something, go run it off. Yeah. Go play basketball. Go, help. And so, they got this idea to do a 5K because they're like, okay, come and exercise your mental health with us and learn more about mental health awareness, learn about the research, the evidence-based research that we will be funding, but also you feel better when you exercise. Absolutely. I have to tell you, never mind that we all women, struggle with our weight often and we want to, look as fabulous as a Ravens cheerleader even when we're close to 50, and that's not possible necessarily genetically. I know that when I've had a terrible day, if I just find that hour to go do a spin class or to get on a treadmill or to walk my dog vigorously, I feel better than any Ativan, and I've had them prescribed to me, ever made me feel. I sleep better, and I am better I am more resilient because of the exercise. That's my own self-observation. So the Bricks feel very strongly about this correlation, as do I. And let's face it, in schools more and more, recess is gone. Right. Athletic programs are becoming extinct because there's no funding in the public system. Thankfully, the private schools, if you're fortunate enough, my son goes to Genesee, which is an amazing school, has a lot available for him, including a full gym to go get, as I like to say, his yayas out. And I tell him, go get him out before you come home because you will sleep better. And he's a different child when he does something other than just play on an Xbox or stay on his electronics. When he gets out and he skateboards, we have a great skate park near Roland Park, Hamden, just off of 83, off of Falls Road. When he does something physical, he deals with his ADHD even better. Yep. And so the medicine, I feel, is to a degree necessary depending on the level of effect the condition has on your child's outcomes. It sets them up for success. My own partner's daughter, she struggled in school her whole life, diagnosed with ADD right before she gets into college. Oh, whoops, first semester of college, didn't go well. Second semester didn't go well. Third semester, she has medicine. All of a sudden, her grades go up. You can't argue with that.
Right.
But it's individual to every child. Yeah. And I would say make sure you find the right provider who cares about the whole picture, not just the prescription pad.
So tell us again about the date.
So the date is Sunday, October 14th. And it is at the historic Maryland State Fairgrounds. And we're going to have the Oriole Bird, who is kicking off the 1 mile family fun run at 8:45. The official 5K starts at 8:30 and will be timed. We actually have an app that you can download on the iTunes and Android store called Run With Me, which helps you time yourself, take pictures, share on social media, and has other information about our sponsors and the vendor village, stuff like that. So people just have to go to jwb5k.com. They can find out anything there.
Awesome.
And Celebrate will be there in the infield with all the kids and hanging out for the day. We're really excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, we're so grateful for your support and your understanding of how this is everybody's issue. I mean, It's kind of like, people didn't want to talk about, I hate to say it in this venue, but people didn't want to talk about AIDS 20 years ago and had to in order for that to be addressed. People didn't want to talk about breast cancer, and now that's one of the most highly treated forms of cancer. I mean, this is affecting our children. It's affecting their friends. And we all, we say it takes a village. In Africa, their feelings about mental illness are, if you are a good village, you do not have mental illness, which is its own podcast in and of itself, but it's a fascinating subject.
Right, but it's time to start talking about it, and we appreciate you getting that conversation going with Celebrate and with our podcast with Richie, and I think it opens a lot of eyes for the way we talk to our kids and communicate with our kids and interact with them on a daily basis.
Monyka, thank you for bringing this to our attention, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Well, thank you, and I'll leave you guys with resources that you can post on your websites and share with your educators and families on this subject. You really are remarkable for being willing to step up and have the important conversations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Parenting and Teaching with Richie Huffman.
Thanks for tuning in, and remember, childhood only comes this way but once.
For more information, head on over to richiehuffman.com.
I'm Richie.
And I'm Allie.
And we look forward to seeing you again on another podcast.